Hello folks, and welcome once again to another helping of Mr H's Hot Pot. You join me today back in Tonge Cemetery in Bolton for another Fred Dibnah related video. And what I'm going to try and attempt to do today for you Hot Potters is match up the locations and the areas of this cemetery that was used back in 1983 in the documentary series for the BBC, which was entitled simply Fred. Now, there's a little interview that Fred gave in this cemetery where he was talking about various things, not least he wanted to be buried in this cemetery himself when he passed away, which obviously, as we know, that came to pass. He has been buried in this cemetery. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and match up some of the stills from 1983 with how they look like today. Now, am I going to do this, I hear you cry, because it's quite a big cemetery, this, and it's a Herculean task that I've set myself. What I'm going to do is use still grabs from that documentary, which I've loaded onto my iPhone, so I know what the view looks like, and then I'm going to walk round and try and match some of the headstones up, some of the more ornate ones that are in the background, if they're still here today, and I'm going to do it that way. So with a bit of luck, we'll be able to match up those locations. Can we do it? I think we can, but we'll have to see. So, without further ado, we'll see if we can match up our first location, shall we?
My house, which is sort of just over there behind all them trees.
Okay folks, well there we have it. That's exactly the same scene that we would have been looking at back in 1983 during that filming with Fred when they brought him in here to do a little bit of an interview. And other than the removal of a gravestone just to the left of that cross and the growth of this tree that's above me here that's just peeking out at the top of my film, it looks exactly the same as it did back in 1983. It's very, very eerie being stood here knowing that the camera crew would have set their camera up roughly where I am now and just filmed this particular location. What they did afterwards, towards the end of the film, as the credits rolled, because Fred had mentioned that he would have liked to have had a little chimney built over his grave, they superimposed one of the factory chimneys that he'd been working on in the distance. I'll put those stills in so it'll complement this, and you'll be able to see that this is an exact match. So I'm going to call that one a success. Right then, on to the next location. We'll see if we can match that one up.
And then this, of course, is the cemetery, you know, where we'll all end up eventually.
Okay folks, well first of all, apologies for any wind that might be caught on camera. As you can probably see though, from that tree in the top left hand corner, the leaves are shaking a little bit, and it's quite a windy little spot where I'm now stood here in Tonge Cemetery. But the scene that you can see in front of you of the mortuary chapel is exactly the same shot that they got back in 1983. Now unfortunately I'm not able to get the same effect that the cameraman or camerawoman got back in 1983, although I'm stood in the same area. And the reason for that is simply they would have put a lens on their camera back in the day, and what that would have done is it would have made that building appear closer to us than it actually is. But if you take a look and take note of the gravestones that are in front of you there, namely the short one there that's just on the bottom right hand corner, and the leaning gravestones, when I put the corresponding shot in from 1983 in a moment, you'll be able to see that this is indeed that same shot. It's just that the cameraman or camerawoman used a little bit of magic and a little bit of camera trickery to make that building appear closer than what it really is. anyway, we'll now move on and we'll see if we can line up another shot from that little interview from way back in 1983.
Like, when my time comes, you know, I think you couldn't really find a more peaceful and nicer cemetery than this, you know. It's nice and quiet, you know, and they cut the grass regular. Not that you'd notice, like, when you're 6 foot under, but it's much nicer than being turned into a little plastic bag or a tin can full of fag ash, innit? And sort of, besides, I wouldn't mind building my own gravestone, you know, like, make one like a chimney.
Okay folks, well we now come to the grand finale of matching up those scenes from that little film that Fred made in 1983 here in Tonge Cemetery, because I've managed to actually locate the 2 gravestones that Fred was stood at the back of when he gave that interview back in 1983. And the gravestone to your left is the one that he was lent again, as he was pointing out various features here in this cemetery and talking about one day himself being buried in here. Now what's rather spooky is, from this spot, you can't see it off camera, but just to the left in the distance I can actually see Fred Dibnah's grave. So it's rather spooky to think that he was stood in that spot there in front of you talking about being buried in this cemetery one day, and just at the back of him is where he eventually ended up being buried. Now very little once again has changed looking at this scene from between 2019 and going way back to 1983, other than the addition of 1 or 2 new gravestones just on the right hand side in the background, and the removal of a rather prominent one that was a rather large cross and a Victorian style, you know, memorial, which would have been in the top right hand corner. Very little once again has changed, other than the growth of the trees as always. Right then, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lift the camera off my tripod, because I brought a tripod with me today so I could get, you know, a still shot of these locations, and I'll show you just how close all these locations was to each other, and that the camera crew really didn't walk very far, probably because they had heavy equipment and they just wanted to get those shots in the can and head off to the next location. So I'll do that now and then we'll wrap this video up. And there's another shot of those 2 gravestones that Fred was stood against, giving his interview back in 1983. Now the actual spot where Fred's buried is just to the left of that tree on the right hand side of the screen as you're looking at it now, where all those vehicles are parked. It's just to the left hand side there, that's where his grave is. So it's not that far from this spot here where he gave the interview to where he's buried. It's almost in a straight line just at the back of him, or where he would have been stood. Rather spooky. Now the shots of the mortuary chapel with the leaning gravestones, that one's there. Again, as you can see, it's not all that far from where he gave the interview. And the gravestone with the cross on it, where they superimposed the chimney at the back, that one is just through those trees there, smack bang in the middle of the screen there. So again, it's not far to the mortuary chapel and those 2 gravestones. And in fact, it's not far from the entrance of Tonge Cemetery. Obviously, those camera crews did not want to be carrying heavy equipment with them all over this cemetery. You know, I've just got a little iPhone here and a tripod, and I know about it carrying my equipment round here. And it is quite a big cemetery, so I don't blame them for just getting the footage in the can and getting it done, so to speak. Right then, with a shot of where Fred's actually buried in the distance, I'll whip the camera around now in a moment and I'll wrap this video up. Well folks, we managed it. We managed to match up all three of those filming locations that was done here in this cemetery back in 1983 for the BBC documentary series Fred. Hope you've enjoyed this video. I've certainly enjoyed just having a walk around and matching it up. This might be something that I get into a little bit more, sort of then and now type of videos. Right then, I'm going to head off and get out of this cemetery now and head back to dear old Wigan. So, until the next time, from myself, Mr H, as always it is, bye bye for now.